Welcome to another episode of the PTCG Hotline. What is going on, chat? How are we doing? We got a fatty in the crowd right now. 15 live viewers, doing excellent. My night's better, a lot better than it was last night. I apologize for getting onto the cast a little late, a day late, but interesting little episode. We actually don't have Henry for this one. He wasn't feeling well, so the schedule change didn't quite work out. But we are here with an amazing guest who's going to be conquering the hottest topic in takes. It's the guy with the inky tattoo, Busted Catron. How we doing, my guy?
What's up, bud? Doing well.
So, my guy has gotten the inky tattoo, as I'm sure the entire chat knows. Ozzy, thank you so much for the gifted sub. We're not going to showcase it because it's a little... I don't know. You can explain it. It's not in the prime to be showcased.
It has a Band-Aid on it, more or less.
It has a Band-Aid on it, but... Forever now, the Inky is with Michael Catron. The top 8 will never forget. It's been a crazy couple weeks. We got the Players' Cup qualifiers on track to finish this week. So to open up the show, we're going to talk a little bit about the Players' Cup qualifiers, what we think the numbers are going to be for qualifying, some of the big decks that have been popping up. We know Pikarom and Dragapult, which is very interesting because on the first episode of the PTCG Hotline, Michael Catron came on here talking about Dragapult. Sure enough, a couple weeks later, it's now dominating these online events. And we're going to go ahead and talk about a little bit of Vivid Voltage. Then we're going to hop into some topics as the show usually goes. So, with that being said, what are your thoughts on the qualifying range for Players' Cup? How are you doing yourself, and what did you play to get there?
I ended with 86 points, so not great, but still in it, I guess. I played ADP to start and did really bad, like really, really bad. Mostly 8th. And then switched to Dragapult and had a pretty good range there. And then I had cut my techs in Dragapult, my Luke Metal techs, and started hitting some more Luke Metals, hitting more Senna Scorch that were being played to hit those Luke Metals. So switched back to ADP for the last couple events, and that went pretty well. So 86 points. I think 86 will be good as of now, but I don't know. Could change.
Absolutely. As we're approaching the final couple days, I believe the 26th is the cutoff. I think you're in a fine position, but like you mentioned, it's going to be close. We don't know how many people have keys or whatever. As for myself, I had a really bad run, just like you said. Started off with some decks that didn't work out too well. Played ADP myself. Played some of Isaiah Bradner's Mewtwo. That deck sucked, and he will say otherwise, but that's for him. As the meta shifted, we got to see a bunch of different decks, more Crushing Hammers coming out. My tweets showcasing Mawile and dumb stuff like that. But I'm actually sitting at 80 points with 4 keys left, so hoping to clutch up a qualification. Didn't expect to be in this position, but I haven't really talked about it much. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. I'm definitely curious to see where the points go. I think 86 and I think 90 is probably like a lock. I don't really see it going higher than 90. So I think for anyone in chat that's thinking about qualifying for Players' Cup 2, I think 90 is probably like a guarantee. Otherwise, sitting at 86 with Catron, you're in it together, and you'll see how it goes from there. I'm not really sure how the tiebreakers work, but definitely interesting to see. As for the decks, in this final week of qualifiers, and I guess this is pretty relevant for the 256 bracket we're going to see, we see Pikarom and Dragapult and some more of these like rogue decks coming out of nowhere that Ian and you talked about on the first week of the hotline. And now we see Pikarom dominating these online events. Alex Szymanski taking the Dragapult deck to some of the Atlas mini events. What are your thoughts on this? And as the Dragapult creator, I think you can speak to its success a little bit more now that you're the special guest.
Yeah, I think Dragapult's really good. I think with how much hype Luke Metal's gotten, which is probably its like closest matchup, I probably wouldn't be playing it for these last couple events. I probably would play like I don't know, probably just ADP still. I think ADP is just the most consistent deck to finish up these last couple of keys, especially with the kind of decrease in mirror matches you'll be seeing with the other decks popping up now. But I think Dragapult's super strong. It has a good ADP matchup, a good Eternatus matchup. Senna Scorch isn't great. Luke Metal's close. I think it's slightly favorable, especially if you do play a Tool Scrapper or a Malolana. And then it also Dragapult the deck that can just naturally handle any sort of like rogue single prize decks that come out of nowhere or just off meta stuff. It's just good at handling it because it's consistent and has solid game planning if anything that needs any sort of bench. Uh, as for Pikarom, I think the deck kind of weak. I think currently it kind of relies on Crushing Hammers a little bit too much, um, especially in the Eternatus matchup. But it's definitely not bad. It can take games off all the top decks, so if you're comfortable with the deck, I don't think it's a bad choice, but it wouldn't be my play for anything.
Absolutely. I've been finishing my last couple of Players Cups qualifiers with Pikarom. I played 2 games of your Dragapult list early on. I just don't think I was experienced enough with the deck and probably played it a little suboptimally. But Pikarom, on the other hand, I agree. It doesn't exactly win against any of the top decks like it really ever has, unless it's like Blacephalon GX from back in Lost Thunder. But the deck overall is just solid. I think you're right with the hammers. You definitely, I know from playing it, it's like, oh, please flip heads here. If you flip heads, you can kind of proceed with your regular plan and then full blitz, whatever from there. Raichu's really good with the stamp, and I've just kind of been being more consistent than a lot of the decks that I've been hitting. I've been opting to go second a lot. If I hit a fire deck, it's completely fine. And I wrote an article on it for CFB. I like the deck. It's really cool, but I definitely agree. I don't think it's like anything super special. The Dragapult is what makes me, more curious about that variant as a whole. The Luke Metal matchup obviously being close, but everything else seemingly decent, and I like it. It's really cool. Good to see the purple guys doing well again. But with that said, on Players Cup and those decks, hopefully that helps anyone in chat thinking about playing some of those rogues. We can expand upon those topics on the viewer call-ins when we get to that segment of the show. But Vivid Voltage, I think we've both taken a look at the set. We talked a little bit about it before the call. I think it's pretty underwhelming. I went ahead and sent you some of the scans. What were some of your thoughts? Anything that stood out to you? Do you think that the format is saved with this set, which I don't think it is, but do some cards become better with an ADP ban versus not an ADP ban? What are your thoughts on Vivid Voltage as a whole?
I don't think Vivid Voltage really changes the format. I think maybe Colossal VMAX does something because it's fighting type, but probably not also because it's fighting type, so it's kind of bad and slow. I think the Rude V is their Rude. I don't know how to say that. Is super strong. Like, the effects of its attacks are super strong, but again, like probably can't keep up with ADP or Eternatus, so not much you can do there. The only thing I think really has any sort of chance of actually sticking would be a Togekiss VMAX deck of some sort, because just searching your deck for 2 cards is really strong. So some sort of Togekiss deck that can out heal stuff, maybe using, because that new Suspicious Food Tin, I think it's called. I don't think it has to be psychic Pokemon. It's just they have to have a psychic energy attached to it, so that can heal off it a lot, along with other healing effects, and your consistent search from your attack is strong. So I think that has a little bit of potential where the other cards are kind of lacking, but I don't think the format's going to change very much. I think ADP, Luke Metal, E-Turn, Scorch are still just going to remain the top decks.
Yeah, and assuming Crushing Hammer stays relevant, I think it's kind of interesting. We could see the Togekiss kind of become like a Sylveon GX kind of control deck. There aren't as many control cards as there used to be, but searching your deck is always good. We saw the Greens Reshizard deck come back into the format that searches your deck for 3 cards with the requirement of Welder. Togekiss, on the other hand, just a double colorless attack, so a few different ways you can power that up. When paired with other Crushing Hammer cards, you can maybe do a slow hand lock kind of thing. The Jirachi Amazing Rare stood out to me a little bit. I think it's something. It's like a consistency engine of some sort. It just like looks at the top card of your deck. I'm gonna bring it up right now. And just for anyone that didn't know, the Togekiss VMAX is a double colorless energy, and then search your deck for 2 cards while dealing, I think it was 120. The Jirachi has the ability Dream Oracle. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon's in your active, you can look at the top 2 cards of your deck, add 1 card to your hand, return the other to the top of the deck. And then the Amazing Star attack, I think, is a little bit too difficult to use. And I think it's very interesting with these amazing rares how their attack cost is just crazy. I don't know if they were expecting Turbo Patch to be really good or they didn't want to make them too broken, but it seems like the abilities on a lot of these Pokemon are pretty decent.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the gimmick with the Amazing Rares is they're rainbows and then they have colorful attack costs. Some of them seem okay. I think the can you play more than one of these in a deck? I think so, right?
I believe so.
Of the
Yeah.
same Amazing Rare.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think Jirachi's the only one that's like for sure gonna see play. It's really good actually. Uh, it'll be a consistency engine that's added to it. Like I think Dragapult will want this card in its deck because Dragapult stopped playing Jirachi in the current format because it doesn't give it a +1 anymore. But this does give it a +1 still, so it'll probably see play in Dragapult along with some other slower decks. I don't think ADP picks it up. Eternatus obviously doesn't. So Senna Scorch might be pretty good in that, but they all Walter probably still wants the other one, so I'm not too sure about that. But I think that card's super strong. And then the other one I liked was the Raikou. I think the 120 and then 120 snipe is super strong. I'm not sure what deck could reliably set it up, but I think the effect of it is very good.
And for anyone in chat that doesn't know, for a grass, lightning, and a metal energy, amazing shot on the amazing rare Raikou does 120 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. I think a lot of these cards could be okay in expanded. Obviously, we don't have any expanded events anytime soon, to our knowledge. But with Vivid Voltage, I think we both agree it's kind of underwhelming with an ADP in play. Do you think anything changes if they were to ban ADP in the upcoming announcement, which I believe is this week? Don't quote me on that, but I believe there's a ban list coming out. If ADP were to be banned, what do you think anything would change?
Um, Not really. I think the format still like I think ADP makes it the format faster, but I think the format still just comes down to who has the boss at the end of the game, because the draw engines will still mostly rely on Dedenne and Eldegoss and Crobat, or at least how most people will build their decks will rely on that. You don't have to, but I think the you'll still see something similar to combozation without combo, obviously, since it's not legal. Just a straight Zation deck will pop up, and the goal will be hit 3 things on the bench. Eternatus will still be strong, trying to knock out 3 things. Uh, and then the other decks will really stay the same because they don't really get affected but too much. They'll lose the ADP matchup since it won't be there anymore. So I actually don't think ADP ban does very much other than remove aspect of RNG from the game, which is a good thing, but I don't think it changes the format too much, the meta.
Yeah, and that's a good take. Definitely, the fast paced format isn't necessarily ADP centered, but ADP definitely plays a role in it. I think crushing hammers will probably stay pretty relevant as time goes on, which I think is just a little annoying, but I don't expect them to ban that card, and I don't want to speculate on every card that they could possibly ban it anyways, because they probably just won't ban any of them. But definitely interesting to see. It's always nice to get fresh cards, and maybe stuff comes out. I think the evolutions cards are cool for down the line, but I don't know if any of the abilities that they block is relevant. Plus, you have to play the stage 1 and memory energy. But yeah, overall, Vivid Vulture is seeming a little underwhelming. Maybe we're wrong. Hopefully, there's some meta shift, but other than that, I don't think we're very excited about it. But before we hop into the live callers, one more topic. What do you think are some of the best plays for the 256 bracket? So I think we briefly touched on this in the closing thoughts for Players Cup 2 qualifiers, but the 256 bracket probably going to be the same format as the qualifiers. If you were to play it, assuming you qualify with 86 keys, what would you play right now?
Right now, I'm playing Pult. 100% I'm playing Pult right now. I like it. I like my chances with it against Eternatus, ADP. I'd probably put back in the Luke Metal Text, so that matchup feels pretty good. Because I don't expect too many people to pull the trigger on the fire decks, other than Mewtwo, which again is a good matchup because they're weak. So I think Dragapult would be my play for sure. With a little more testing, I might actually switch to Senna Scorch. I think Senna Scorch has pretty insane matchups, but the deck's kind of inconsistent. So if I could find a way to make that a bit more consistent, I might pull the trigger on that. But I don't think I'd play any of the other decks.
And with Senna Scorch, are you looking towards like a Tord version with the Kabu and greens, your own thing, or similar to how Alex and Cash and some other people have been playing it with the Jirachis and whatnot.
Probably an ability version, but definitely wouldn't be playing the small Jirachi package they had. That seems really, really bad, but probably an ability version. Torch version's really good, but I feel like sometimes it's just like that one piece short from hitting what it needs. Because like it's slower, so if they hit what they need, I feel like it can kind of just fall behind. So like if you're setting up, if you only get one Scorch down and they go boss knockout, you don't really have a response because it's hard for you to get two things down at the same turn. So if you green for double quick ball, you lose a lot of value in your hand, and that's kind of the thing with green stacks is they need their hand to be strong, and if they can't have that strong hand, which they lose a lot of value because they have to go greens double quick ball and then discard two more cards for those quick balls to get the center scorches down, then they if they only get one center scorch down, then they play the risk of again getting bossed again, and then they just lose the game. So I think that version is pretty risky against stuff like Zacian and even Eternatus, but it's definitely strong if it can get there. And I think overall it just relies too much on the opponent whiffing, so you need to play the ability version to try and avoid that.
Well, you heard it here, chat, and viewers on any of the other platforms. Dragapult, Clefable, I would assume, and ability Scorch for the Players' Cup qualifier. So if you're in the position to qualify, I believe you might be seeing some articles on those decks eventually. I know Michael writes for Poke Beach, so definitely stay tuned for those. But with that being said, we've talked a little bit about Players' Cup qualifiers, the Players' Cup 256 bracket, Vivid Voltage. So a few interesting topics for Pokemon right now. Definitely freshens up some of the topics about previous standard that we've talked about. We're going to go ahead and hop into the live viewer call-ins. You know how this works if you're a returning guest. If you're new here, first of all, welcome. But basically how this works is you're going to want to use !Discord or !Hotline. That's going to then take you to the Jenks' Lab Discord. From there, you want to navigate to the instructions channel under the PTCG Hotline channel. Once you are there, read that real quick. Just gives guidelines about what I'm about to say now. Then once you have read that, go ahead and post your topic that you want to come into the live call and talk about, which then me, Michael, and you will discuss. You want to discuss your take and your opinion on that take, and then once you have put that in the podcast topic channel, I will slide people from the waiting room into the live call, which will then talk about the topics and hopefully go for the remainder of the show. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and drag in our first guest. I'm going to go ahead and let him know real quick that we're dragging him in. Don't want to surprise him. And we'll be off. So our first topic, assuming this person is ready, is actually a really cool one. It's kind of about player improving, next steps once you've started to win some of the smaller events. So I'm going to go ahead and let him talk about it himself once we get him in here. So I'm going to go ahead and drag him in. Yo, what's up, Mela? How are you doing? How's it going? What's your name and where are you calling from?
What's up, guys? My name is Devin Myers, and I'm calling from Mississippi.
That's awesome, Devin. Glad to have you on the show. What is your topic today and your take on it?
Okay, so basically, I was just calling to see what you guys thought as far as tips you could give to somebody like myself, where this was my first really competitive year. I won 6 of my 8 challenges, won 3 cups. It's like I feel like I've gotten to that point of being able to do really well at locals and stuff, but it's like, what do you say I should do to be able to just get over that hump, get over that edge of starting to do good at regionals consistently? Because I feel like I'm missing something, but I just can't put my finger on it.
Absolutely. That's a great topic. I'm ready to talk about it. I'm going to go ahead and let Michael lead, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so this is actually something I struggled with a lot. Was I had the placements at locals for a long time, at least in my first or second year. Once I aged up into masters, I had the placements at locals, but couldn't really get it done at the big event. And the biggest thing for me was like, one was not letting other people kind of impact my deck choice. If I thought a deck was good, I would go with it now, and that's just how I choose my deck. And that's helped me a lot, like, because when I choose my own deck, it lets me look at my plays more and really analyze what went wrong rather than somehow blaming it on the deck. And I think that's also the biggest thing is being able to, once you lose a round, or even when you win a round, being able to sit down and go and ask yourself why that happened, and then see what could have been improved. Because even on a win, there's many of times where you could still have improved your gameplay, and then take that and apply it to the next game, and just continue doing this every single time, and eventually you'll get there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. What Michael said is a really great example of just like mentality, improving upon what you've learned already. So sometimes testing and things like that. I'm not sure, Devin, if you have a testing group that you test with actively, but with testing, you can only learn so much, and it's in a very like controlled environment because you are talking plays out with other people that you're working with. You're in a chill environment, but when it comes to a tournament, you're there to win. At least that's what it sounds like the goal is. And at local events, there isn't a ton of stress. There's still some stress because you want to win, but what Michael said about looking at individual games, individual turns, thinking out each action, and even if you win a game, and I think this point that Michael said was huge, even if you win a game, there are still things that can be made better. I don't think anyone has ever gone on a perfect tournament run. It's almost impossible just to think about it, but I was a little different from Michael. I started off in seniors, and I did okay at my starting events. I had a really rough streak when I started playing the game, just because I was not good. I did not understand how to learn from mistakes. I was bad at networking. I didn't understand a lot of some of the core skills that people need to get in order to win even local events. It wasn't really until the last couple months of me being a senior that I started to win a few league cups and whatnot. Then I started doing better at some of the bigger events, and then once I transitioned to Masters, I had a huge pop-off at a big regionals, but from there my League Cup finishes were lackluster, and then I think it was about February of that year I finally won a League Cup and then didn't win another one. And then it wasn't really till my second season that I was able to start doing better at League Cups and putting myself around players that were better than me, and this was huge. If you don't have people in the local area that you think are better than you, I would start networking. Just people that you meet at events. Maybe you face someone at a regionals that beats you, and they seem friendly. You just be like, hey, what could I have done to do better here? Or do you want to work together sometime? And just expanding your group of who you talk to is a really great way to then learn metagaming and other decks like that, because although you can work on one deck a whole lot, or it's your own creation and it goes really well, it's also super important to be able to identify problems with the meta and follow meta trends, and then from there you can make calculated calls that go from just placing at the local events to then placing at day 2 events. And it's a big thing to think about. Also, I think that a lot of players don't really think about this when they're thinking about day 2ing regionals. It is completely fine to take losses in regionals. So if you go in with a deck that loses to one deck really hard, you just kind of have to think about the odds of you hitting more than 2 realistically of that deck in a run. So you can kind of use predictions in regionals especially and go deep with those predictions compared to a local event where you show up and you kind of just have to counter the local area. Regionals are more about predictions and following meta trends, but what Michael said is 100% true. Analyzing your mistakes that you find in general will just improve you as a player so much.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to try to apply that the best I can, and hopefully I can pull out a good finish this coming year if we ever get live events back.
Yeah,
absolutely. Of course, that is the hope, but for the online, it's really cool because you have such a large sample size of data to analyze. If you think about it, there are so many online events, and of course everyone has a different schedule that allows them to play in certain ones, but especially because you're not at an actual tournament, you can take notes about stuff that's happening in game and then analyze it deeper. But Devin, thank you so much for coming on. It was a great topic, and any final words?
I don't think so. Just thank y'all for the advice.
No problem. Have a good one.
All right, you too.
All right, so a great topic for anyone that is looking to move from the local scene, if you're having a bunch of success there and going into regionals. I love it. It's a great topic, and I think we were able to use some personal experience there to help Devin with that. The next caller, I'm pretty sure this guy's just trying to be funny, but we're going to go ahead and drag in Isaiah Bradner, because for some reason, this guy wants to come on here. How is your name? I'm
Yo.
not even gonna introduce. We know who you are, and we don't want to know your original question. Just get to the gag.
All right. Okay. So I actually have a question for both of you. So Will,
Oh.
I wanted to ask you. I wanted to say, what are your thoughts on fish? My dad's been making fish a lot lately. Yeah, and mostly tilapia, and I absolutely love it. So I wanted to know what your thoughts are on fish. I know that you love food. You work at the Don, so
Bro,
wanted to
he's
get your
calling
thoughts.
you fat.
All right. So fish fillets, not about it. I mean, this call is pretty heavy, so like I understand it's completely fine.
Oh
But
my god.
What? That was not an insult. It
if
was a
you're
legitimate question.
if you're ordering,
Radner is shooting shots right now. Unbelievable, this guy.
if you're ordering the fish fillet at McDonald's, you're probably over 80, so I'll give you the pass. If you're under 80, not acceptable. Tilapia, on the other hand, tilapia with some nice pesto it was pretty good. Fish and chips, although it's fried, still fish, pretty good. Cod is gas. Salmon is busted. There's a lot of good fish out there. A lot of fish, some of it doesn't have taste. Like tilapia is not really a taste fish, but this is where sauces are gonna come in. And I know Isaiah hates sauce, so I don't really understand
Okay,
how
my
you
dad
enjoy it.
spiced it up a lot.
All right, so Dadner's on the spices. Got it.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, overall, I'd say fish is a dub. Wouldn't like to have any of that super fishy tasting fish though. I think people know.
Yeah, I got what you're saying. All right, and then I wanted to ask Catron. All right, Catron, what are your thoughts on Daniel Jones getting more points tonight than Drew Lock has the entire fantasy football season?
Yo, Drew Lock's the GOAT, bro. Drew Lock is so good, it's unbelievable. He's probably the best quarterback in the NFL. Like, it simply doesn't make sense. It's not natural how good he is.
Yeah, it's quite a miracle. I agree. All right, thanks for having me on, guys.
No problem. Get out of here, fish. So Isaiah, before the show even started, wanted to come in here and clown on us. So he didn't tell us what he was going to talk about, but I think he got Catron with something about drafts. But we're gonna go ahead and drag on our quad show. I don't. That's not English, but this guy coming in 4 times in a row. This guy must like the show, because if he doesn't, I don't know what he's doing here. We got Alex, the guy with 2 hats, the 4th appearance. How's it going, my guy?
I'm just chilling tonight. How have you been, Will? How have you been in your cartoon?
I'm chilling. Last night was a long night. That's why we didn't have Hotline, but I am glad to be back in the hot seat, answering the hottest takes and topics with my friend Michael Catron.
That's pretty epic, not gonna lie. I literally, like 5 minutes ago, just caught a shiny Darkrai, my Pokemon Pearl. I spent 5 hours trying to get, like 4 today and like an hour yesterday, so like I'll take it.
Gas.
Very nice.
The shinies are always good.
Oh yeah, shiny Darkrai's gas. I had to do a glitch, but it was like so worth it. Like this really convoluted glitch. Like it took me like a half an hour to like pull off. And I was worried about breaking my game the entire time.
So what brings you to the hotline today, Alex?
So I just wanted to discuss why just so many toxic cards are being played in the format. Like cards like Crushing Hammer, cards like Clefable in combination with Scoop Up Net, which is just energy removal cards in general, which normally are only usually seen in control decks or lock style decks like Seismitoad and energy or Giratina decks, Giratina Ancient Origins that would try to deny special energy, stuff like that. And my firm belief is that just how fast games are going. With a game lasting 3 turns, maybe 5 turns at max, generally speaking, if you flip a heads on a Crushing Hammer, putting your opponent behind, making them whiff, they a lot of times just lose the game, one way or another.
Yeah, that's actually the exact reason. Like, so this can kind of go back to Magic, actually. In Magic, there's a card called Time Walk, which just says take an extra turn.
Oh wow!
And so that's kind of the idea behind Crushing Hammer in most decks. In something like ADP and Pikarom, the Crushing Hammers, specifically against decks like Eternatus that can only attach 1 a turn, the Crushing Hammers act as a sort of time walk, where their whole goal is just to remove that energy, which basically just gives them an extra turn. Because their opponent can't do anything if they get the head from the hammer. So the entire premise is to give you an extra turn, which put you a turn ahead, which in this format, like you said, is because it's so fast, just wins them the game. So it's a huge flip card in matchups where it takes a game that's 50-50 and makes it a 100% win, where it just swings the game completely into your favor. It's less relevant in decks like ADP, where they do have the metal patch and E-switch and stuff, but it still has the chance of making them whiff. And it just makes your odds better of winning any specific game because the format is so fast. And all these decks need to have that 1 or 2 turns that give them the big turn they need, their ADP GX or their first attack with Eternatus.
Like, honestly, I found it so wild that literally Pikarom with one heads flip usually just beats Eternatus. Like, usually 80-20s or better if you flip one heads. I've probably played maybe 10 games with Pikarom, and I've maybe lost to Eternatus once. Just crazy that it's usually because of Crushing Hammer.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that's one of the only reasons that Pikarom is still around, even because the Crushing Hammer, it swings a lot of matchups in your favor, especially Eternatus. I've noticed it a lot when playing on ladder. You can get an early heads flip and they're not able to like power accelerator. It's really rough for them. And then when you combine the early disruption with the late game disruption, they kind of have to draw really well and get the attachments down. And if you hit heads on the Crushing Hammer, they just fall behind. And what Michael said about the Magic comparison is really cool because it is just kind of like taking a turn back. Not all these decks can accelerate energy like that, other than like ADP. But then you're trying to disrupt ADP's GX. They only have 2 water energies, so they have to go find the water energy. They burn through their resources really fast. I've noticed that a lot about ADP is they just kind of like slam their resources into the discard, trying to get the GX attack. So if you can disrupt it in any way, they're kind of bodied. And then they just burn all these switch cards. And I mean, I guess this applies to a lot of the meta decks right now. There's not a whole lot of punish room unless you're playing Pikarom for some of these resources that get discarded.
Because without Electro Powers, Pikarom really doesn't two-shot anything. Without a GX attack, obviously, it's really just 3-shot stuff, which I find wild.
Yeah, it does 3-shot stuff, but I mean, you can use the early game hammers to remove small energy attachments, and then once they actually get an attacker going, if they do, you can like full blitz into Tag Bolt. You can try in 250 with Raichu. So I mean, the 3 shots you can turn them into 2 shots, so that once they actually get the big attacker going, you just remove it with your GX attacks.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that it actually turns it into 2 shots. I think most of us are playing Coco V now, so they're 150 into 200. A lot of lists still play Bolton. Bolton usually hits the numbers to make it a 2-shot, or even Bolton can even get a 1-shot if you're that far ahead. And so the deck's just a very tempo based deck where if you can get a turn ahead, you've won the game. So that's the entire goal of the deck, is getting a step ahead. Whether it's getting a turn 1 full blitz onto something your opponent, onto like the ADP. If ADP has a turn 1 full blitz onto them, they basically lose. Or hitting the hammerheads against Eternatus, or just simply outpacing the opponent. It's just hard for people to deal with that sort of pressure because I think Pikrom's pretty much the only deck that can apply that pressure, other than an ADP that turn 1 GXs or just doesn't go for GX. And then still they have flaws where, because their attack doesn't attach energy like Pikrom's does, they can get knocked out once and then they're behind. So Pikrom's kind of the only deck that can maintain the speed throughout the game. So if it can get that step ahead, it will win the game.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, the Crushing Hammer thing is just people trying to gain tempo, and then Pikarom in particular, it's trying to do the same thing. So I don't think there's a whole lot else to talk about on that topic unless you had any other thoughts, Alex.
Team Yellgrunt is broken.
I mean,
Team Yellgrunt plus Stamp.
I mean, the Team Yellgrunt is good because it can kind of help to offset the Crushing Hammer tails. Like it's just another out to remove energy, and against things like Eternatus to have 2 attachments, the Yellgrunt definitely helps. But I can agree.
Yeah, Yellgrunt does the same thing. It gives you the turn, right? So if you have your optimal turn with the luxury of playing Yellgrunt, it's pretty broken. But if you're not progressing your turn the way you need to, Yellgrunt is suboptimal, and you should be still trying to play something like the Sycamore or Marnie. To
Oh no,
get
100%.
into the
Yeah,
set.
like I found it like it's in a way similar. I found it similar to boss, where obviously if your turn wasn't optimal, you would not use boss's orders. You'd have to go for a research. You'd have to go for a Marnie. You'd have to go for bird keeper if you're opting to play bird keeper. Just something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's gonna wrap it up on this topic. Alex, once again, thank you for coming on 4 times in a row. Hopefully, we'll see you next week. Appreciate you every time you come on. Have a good one, my guy.
I'm glad you had me here. Thanks.
See you, Alex. All right, so the next person we're going to drag in has another really cool topic similar to Devin about the player skills improving at the game. We're going to go ahead and bring him in. Yo, what's going on? Where are you calling from, and what's your name?
Hey, Will. My name is Ricky. I'm calling in from Vancouver, British Columbia. Long-time viewer of your videos. Very excited to be here. My question kind of like stems from Devin's, where I feel like a lot of players they look at their events and they kind of they think about like what event like establishes themselves as like a top player. Like they walk away from the tournament feeling like, yeah, I can compete with the best players in the world. I am like on that level. Do you guys have any events that come to mind when you think about that? And my other one question would be, what is an event that were like really disappointed in your performance, where like you just felt like you missed your chance of winning a championship or whatever?
This is okay. Two very hit home topics for I think Michael and I. I love it.
Ricky knows what he's doing, bro.
I'm gonna go ahead and give it to Michael. I think we can get pretty deep into this topic. So with the first question, just restating, what's the first tournament where you felt we could compete with top level players?
For that one, it's actually interesting. I kind of had a name coming up because I was friends with a lot of other top seniors coming up. That ended up placing. I was friends with Joe Rudiger, the Szymanskis, that all just right off the bat had really good placements. And I was kind of left there not having as good of placements. I had a day 2, ended up doing kind of good at Origins, but that's about it. But I think when it clicked and I was like, all right, I'm able to compete now, was actually an ARG event. The ARG Invitational in 2018, right before Worlds, that's when it kind of clicked with me. I was like, all right, I think I'm actually pretty good at the game now. I understand what's happening, and I can kind of, like I said to Devin, is take myself back to the game and realize what I'm doing wrong to improve that, to see where I can go, like how can I change this stuff from game to game. And it's not even just like memorizing stuff for one deck, it's improving your play overall and being able to translate stuff from one deck to another. And it was when I first picked up Buzzrock was kind of a big turning point, because that deck, I had the assumption that it wasn't very skillful, and then I ended up picking it up, couldn't win with it, and then something during that event kind of clicked, and I just kind of started rolling with the deck and figured stuff out, and from there kind of took me off to where I am now.
And I'm gonna go ahead and say my part before we hop into the second part. As for me, I guess Michael started with knowing people in seniors. I came into the game as a senior. I know Michael's been playing for a very long time, so he even played back in juniors. And to me, what always felt like was holding me back was time. I would be competing in my local area with people like Michael and John. I was very fortunate in having like really good players as my local players off the start. And every time I would play with them or against them, around them, whatever, I always felt that I didn't have time on my hand, and that these players had so much time, 10 plus years in the game, to my like 1 and then 2 and then 3 as time went on. So I felt like I was lacking a lot of time compared to some of these other players. And I was very fortunate to have a lot of good players in the area. It made it very easy to learn. Igor and Jimmy Pendarvis were super helpful in the local area just to analyze some of their plays. And then Justin Bokhari, I kind of like attached myself to him and was just able to learn a whole lot from him. But I feel like my breakout tournament where people started to know my name would have been Toronto 2019, and it's not even for a good reason. I threw my stream match so bad against a matchup that is just amazing for Trevenant at the time. So I don't think that was like where I realized, oh, I can compete with top players, but I think more of I realize I can top 8 events. And I think that's kind of what helped my motivation. As for what helped me realize I could compete with top players was Daytona regionals this past year, where I played ADP Keldeo. Xander Pero helped me a ton by handing me his archetype, and then I was able to change it a little bit to my preference. And this will tie into our second question, but I felt like once I got that top 8, I had become first seed at a few tournaments, then heading into day 2 and then to top 8, and I just felt like on top of the world at that event. And going into the second topic, I'll let Michael start first, but that's kind of where it like abruptly ended for me. So our second topic is, what was the event that you felt you could have won, and circumstances didn't play out?
The event I actually have an event that I completely threw in my top 8 match as well, and it was Ace or Atlantic City top 8 against Grant. I literally just had to announce cross divide, and I would have won the game, but I just didn't see it. I misplayed, and then ended up hard bricking game 3 and losing on prizes to Pidgey. But the one I'm actually most passionate about is Hartford regionals last year. I had built this Regirock deck. I was really hype on it. I knew my only 2 bad matchups were Trevenant and Archie's Blastoise, and everything else was more or less a literal auto win. I ended up making day 2 at 7-1-1. Then the first 3 rounds of day 2, I hit Archie's and Trevenant, and there's just nothing I could do about it. So it felt like it kind of fell out of my hands. But I had the winning deck. Had I hit Jose, who ended up winning the event, his deck can't beat mine. Had I hit Justin Kulas, who was 8-0-1 going into top 8, going into day 2 of that event, Pikarom couldn't beat my deck. So it felt like something that I had was like should have been there. I just couldn't get it. So that was definitely the one that's the roughest for me and kind of sucks, but it happens. You just kind of have to bring yourself up from it and keep going until you get there.
And yeah, the Regirock deck that Michael played, if you haven't seen it, go on his Limitless page. It's really cool. I remember him sending me the list for it the day before the event, and I was like, Regirock? That's cool. And I couldn't bring myself to play it. I ended up playing Hitmonchan instead, so kind of similar. But yeah, that's a really cool deck. If you haven't seen it, chat, I would definitely go check out Catron's Limitless page, and you'd find some other crazy concepts. As for myself, I feel like the Toronto where I misplayed against Jimmy was probably one of my hardest losses. But I knew that I wasn't really as good as it might have seemed with a top 4 in my head. So I just kind of brushed it off. I tried to learn from the mistake, and thinking about that misplay still hurts. Like if I think about it too much, it was really painful at the time. A lot of messages like, "What are you doing?" Whatever. So it definitely sucks misplaying on stream. Wouldn't recommend, but obviously you can't really prevent it. Stuff happens in game that a lot of people can't control. Then later that year there was I'm getting my timeline messed up, but at some point it was Collinsville regionals where the Pikachu Zekrom toolbox deck was really good from Australia, and I played it with Justin Bokhari. We both day 2'd. I ended up finishing 128, and I felt like our deck was just so much better than a lot of the decks that were there. I felt like we were really ahead. The Pikachu Zekrom deck was super strong. It was a little inconsistent, and I feel like my lack of knowledge with the deck, because it was such a short time frame from Australia to Collinsville, really sucked. But I felt like that was one time where the deck I had was like a winning deck for sure. And then the one that really blows was what I was talking about earlier, Daytona Regionals, where I played ADP Keldeo. Although Xander came up with the archetype, I felt that the list that I had come up with off of his archetype was really, really strong. I was super confident after I ended up playing it. I was not very confident in the deck before playing it. And then sure enough, I enter day 2 as first seed, and then entered top 8 as first seed as well. I was able to, help Xander get into cut. I helped some of my other friends get into cut, like Michael. And I don't think I rigged the bracket in my favor very well, but it's kind of up in the air on debate like that. So I'm feeling really good against a lot of my matchups. The only deck that I have to dodge is Guardian, and it basically comes down to there's some games that need to not tie so that one person gets into top 8 over the other, whatever. Long story short, I feel like I am unbeatable. I don't even think I took a loss that tournament. I think I was undefeated, and I end up playing against Drew Kate, who won the regionals, and he was playing Guardian, and it was the only matchup that I felt like I had zero chance of winning. And props to Drew for winning and having that really good meta call. I'm a really big fan of meta calls, but it kind of felt like I had gotten robbed out of a regionals win, if not me, Xander. And then of course Xander lost him in the finals, but like that hurt. When I saw the standings go up and I saw him as ace seed, I kind of just got crushed inside because I felt like I had done so well over the weekend, losing no games other than a concession to like boost bracket or whatever, and that sucked. It was not a good feeling.
Yeah, it's always rough when you hit a bad matchup in cut. Two of my cut losses, I hit a near auto loss. One of them was also Drew Kate in that same top 8. I played him after you, and he smoked me. And then the other one was Kiana Meany with his green Zard, which I also couldn't beat. So it's like you're right there, but then you hit the auto loss and cut, and you're just like, anyone else I could have beat.
Yeah, and that definitely
it's
was
a rough feeling. Yeah.
But I think that's our thoughts on the topic. A really good topic. Did you have anything else for us, Ricky?
No, that pretty much answered all I wanted to hear. I really like those stories. I also like the fact that like Catron's story about him feeling like he became like able to compete with a top tier player didn't come from an actual like official Pokemon event. So it makes me feel like people who like play in these online big like tournament events, right? Like the limitless qualifiers, the Hexters, they can get the same feeling and kind of like push that momentum into like the real life tournaments when we eventually get it started back up. Yeah. So thank you for the stories. I really enjoyed them.
No problem, Ricky. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Have a good night, guys.
You too.
You too.
Absolutely. I actually think what Ricky just finished with is pretty cool. I know there's a little bit of controversy on this topic for differing opinions, but I do think that what Ricky said about competing with like other players of your skill level at least on these online events, since there's such a like big quantity, people can get a lot of testing in. I think it's cool that people have the ability to improve while the game is not around. And although, and I'm going to branch into a different topic after this once we get your thoughts on it, Michael, but I think it's really good that people can kind of use this time as improvement if they're trying to like take their play to the next level. But I mean, in perspective, not as many of the top players are playing, but it's still definitely a nice thing to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the thing with the online events is the accomplishment of winning one. It is like an accomplishment is what you make it, right? Like to me, I don't feel accomplished unless I've won. Unless I've won the event, I don't really feel like it's that much of an accomplishment. But if making top 16 in a Hexter is a step up for you and that's what you wanted to achieve, then you got it, right? That's what you wanted. And it's like you shouldn't let other people define your accomplishments for you. And then whether you see it as an accomplishment or not, if you're about the grind and trying to improve yourself as a player, that's what you should be focused on. Rather than getting a placement, it's just improving yourself. Even if like you're not seeing the result, it just keep focusing on improving until you see the result. The biggest advocate for this I've ever seen is just grinding it out is Isaiah Bradner, who has easily established himself as one of the best players in the game right now. He just constantly grinds the game until he can get there. And he has. He's played the game more than anyone I've ever seen play the game consistently, and then he cemented himself easily at the top of the game.
Yeah, and I met Isaiah early on in my Pokemon journey, and him and I were probably very similar in skill level, complete noobs to the game. And I know I didn't put nearly as much time into the game as he did, and we still found success around similar times, him in seniors, and then once in masters, both similar results. But yeah, I'm not a true believer in the like 100% grind. It just doesn't really work with how I like to play the game. But on the other hand, if you actually can refine your own skills, learn to play the game a ton, similar to something like Isaiah, and maybe Isaiah will release an article about like his grind or something that people can read, I think that'd be a really good resource. But if you can do what Isaiah did and like becoming good at Pokemon is your main priority, I think anything's possible, and especially from a young age where there aren't a whole lot of responsibilities, like a full-time job or something. Yeah, I agree. And Tord too. Tord is very similar. He plays against himself.
Yeah.
He grinds a ton, and you can see that like it's one thing to be a top player, but to be the best, I think Isaiah and Tord, at least in the online sphere, for sure, compete with each other for that. And they just play so much, like unlike many people. When the quarantine era kind of hit, I know Isaiah was still grinding. I stopped playing. A lot of my friends stopped playing. I don't know if you continued playing, but Isaiah was,
No, I didn't.
gung ho testing for every event. It didn't really matter what it was, and just playing and playing will eventually get you there. I talked about this a little bit on one of my YouTube videos, but if you play 100 tournaments or 100 games, you're bound to win one. And I mean, I guess if over time you just improve that ratio, you can start winning tons of events. But yeah. Definitely a good way to improve at the game is just play, keep playing, and eventually you will find success. That's kind of how I felt with myself. I knew that if I just kept playing the game, eventually something would click and I would get there. But something I want to branch into a little bit about what you were mentioning. What do you think would have been like one of the biggest errors or like misjudgments in self-confidence? I talked about this in one of my videos on YouTube. And I felt that when I aged up from seniors to masters, I had a hot streak in seniors and then popped off my first masters event, and my self-confidence just like blew through the roof. And it was super, super annoying, I know, to a lot of people around me. Do you have anything, similar that you would give advice to people about something like that?
It's gonna sound really weird and very against what most people say. Is I go into every game expecting to lose. Every single game I go in and I expect to lose. I expect them to have what they need at every situation for me not to be able to handle it. So my play is always to try and find how can I stop that? What is the most likely way for me to stop them from being able to do the most optimal thing for them? And then if that optimal thing for them is very unlikely, then what is something that can help them and hurt me enough to where I'm gonna lose this game? So I go in very pessimistic and expect them like there's been times where I'm playing Malamar, right, and I hit I'm trying to think of Mewtwo. A Mewtwo, like, this after Mimikyu came out. So just an almost auto win. And I sit down, just like, yeah, I have no idea how I'm going to beat this guy. And it's just like, you have to sit down and just take it one game at a time. Like, you can't, it doesn't matter who you're against. Just take it one game at a time, play your game, and don't overestimate yourself or your opponent, and just play the game like you know how to. Going in with any sort of judgment of I should win or anything like that is just going to make you overconfident and can make your play sloppy.
Absolutely. I think that's a big takeaway, especially for people that are starting to get a confidence boost. I know I've seen it many times where people just think they should win every game that they play because, they are a top player or they're a top player in the local scene or whatever. And they go into these games thinking they know it all, and then they beat you, and then it's like an embarrassing loss for that person after talking all this stuff about winning a game, and then they lose. And I think I kind of approach that similarly, not expecting to lose every game, but I more so think about the possibility of losing. So even though I have a perfect board state late in the game, I kind of go, all right, well, now that I'm in this position, how can I lose from this position? And then, like you said, try and counter what is optimal for my opponent. But yeah, definitely don't want to get super big-headed on stuff like that. It just doesn't do anything for you, and then when you lose, it looks even worse. But definitely something that helped me a lot was putting stuff in perspective. And I think another thing that you said that's really good is one game at a time. There's been a lot of tournaments where I've started literally 0-2-1, so a loss or a tie, and I'm out of day 2, and then you're just like, oh, I need to win 6 games straight to day 2 for this regionals, or you're at a League Cup and you lose round 1, tie round 2 or whatever, and you're just like, okay, well, I need to win 4 or 5 games to get into the top 8. Well, if you look at it like that, it seems like a mountain to climb. I know I've been in bad headspaces where I start off bad and I'm just like, well, I can't really do anything about this. If I lose one game, I'm out. The trip is wasted or whatever. But it really helped to change my mindset of what you said, taking one game at a time. Because if you look at it as like a mountain, it's nice to have the overall goal, and it feels really good when you actually accomplish that goal. But I've won out plenty of times where if you were to talk to me and ask how I was feeling at X2-1 in the early rounds, I'd just be like, just another game. If I lose, I lose. If I win, great. But you can't really, you don't want to put too much pressure on yourself. Taking it game by game is super important, round by round even, and learning from the mistakes that we've covered a lot already is definitely a good mindset to have, especially for newer players.
Yeah. Like, this is something, like, even if you're not looking at the event as a whole, you can look at it as one theory. It's like, so the great example is that Daytona Regionals, I'm playing Malamar, I go into the event with a hard loss to ADP and find out a bunch of top players brought ADP. And I'm just like, all right, this kind of sucks. We actually sat next to each other round one. You told me you're playing ADP, and I'm playing against an ADP this round. So I was like, okay, this sucks. I started the event like 1-2-1, and I was like, I actually ended up making a bet with Igor Costa, and I was like, I'm gonna make day 2, and you're not. And that was the bet. It was a $10 bet, and I ended up winning the next 5 and making it in. And it was kind of like something that I didn't really think about during the event. It was like, am I gonna make day 2? It was like, I'm just gonna play some Pokemon and see what happens. Then later during day 2, I ended up playing against Gustavo, and this is my first time playing Gustavo, and I was like, when I saw it, I was kind of intimidated. I was like, all right, yeah, Gustavo's kind of the guy. He's pretty good at Pokemon, and I know he's playing Mewtwo, so I know I have a good matchup. And he sits down. I open my hand for game 1, completely dead, and I'm just like, you know what? I got next game. Play game 2, and I beat him. And then I'm just like, all right, just one more. And then game 3 rolls around, and all 4 of my Inkays are prized. But I'm still just like, it's just one game, right? I'm like, if I lose this, it doesn't really matter. And if I win it, that's great. I'm closer to cut. I ended up winning, but it was kind of like a realization during that game. I was like, this is just one game. I can still grind through and get there. So it's just like looking at it as a game thing instead of as a whole event. Like, looking at the whole event after is fine, but one time during your round, during game, keep it just to the game. Like, don't think about the whole event, because then you're just thinking outside of the game, and it can be destructive for your play, and it's just not helpful.
For sure. And now that we've talked about it so much, especially in front of like an audience, Daytona was a wild event for both of us. 13+ hour car ride to Daytona. Shout out to Locke and TJ for coming with us. Locke drove a lot of the distance, and I drove the rest. So we got in. I think we were pretty tired. We drove through the night, and then you had your Malamar deck. I got my deck from Xander. Sure enough, round 1, that still cracks me up till this day. We just kind of looked at each other, and I knew I hated my deck because I wanted to play Mewtwo with Isaiah, but I kind of went on a gut feeling that maybe ADP was good. And keep in mind, for anyone that was around playing in this time, the Cosmic Eclipse format had just begun. We had just gotten back from Brazil. I think Daytona was like the week after. And
it was 2 weeks after, right? Because it was Thanksgiving weekend. That was Daytona. Because I remember we had eaten Thanksgiving. TJ came to my house for Thanksgiving, so we had eaten Thanksgiving, and then the next morning we woke up for Daytona.
Yeah, so
I think
it was just crazy. And the reason I bring that up is because ADP and I see people in chat talking about this, which I think is just on key. ADP low-key sucked. Like, coming out of Brazil, ADP was looked upon as the deck that had, people didn't really think it was that good going into Brazil. Then it ended up being the most played deck, I think. And then after that event, people were like, oh, it got all this play and it just did not see any placements at all. This deck must suck. And as shout out to Mr. Network in chat, he brings up that in a group chat that I was in with him, I mentioned ADP sucks. And I thought it was like the worst deck. That was the worst possible play for that tournament. But as the week went on, I talked to some of my friends about ADP, and then sure enough, Xander was testing ADP, and I had read his article about it, so I already had a little bit of idea in mind. And I told this group chat that ADP sucked, and then I ended up topping the event with it. But yeah, that round one, I hated my deck. I was sad I didn't lock in Mewtwo. I'm sitting against someone that, it was their first tournament, and it was really pleasure to play against them. And you're on my right. I can tell you're kind of like tilting out of your chair against your opponent who's playing ADP.
Bro, I was so mad.
You're like, I'm playing the Squids, and I'm just like, nice. So I have a good matchup against someone. And then we started talking like who's playing Malamar. I started realizing all these good players were playing Malamar, and that was a crazy event. I ended up winning that round one. I think you had a tie, right, or a loss? Loss, right?
No, I took a game against ADP, but no, I got clapped.
Yeah. And then it was after round one. I like walked up to some of my friends, and then everyone was like, oh, DDG is on Doll Stall with this, and this. And I go to Xander, and Xander's like, dude, we actually auto-win them. Like, if you think about it, we have Giraffe Rig, we have Cryogonals, like, we have this. And I'm like, huh, okay. So my meta call that I thought sucked, and I wasn't very confident in, ended up working out really well because all the top players played a deck that I auto-won. There weren't a whole lot of bad matchups. The Mewtwo decks weren't prepared for it. Then you have Catron playing the Squids and completely different sides of the spectrum. I go soaring through day one, enter first seed twice. Catron coming from the bottom of the barrel into top 8. Then I meet him in the final round. There's a great picture on my Facebook and my YouTube intro of us shaking hands at table 1 as I get him in cut. And, Catron ends up doing better than me, which I was fiending for that free win in top 8, but yeah, that was a crazy event, and it's stories like these that make me want events to come back because it's just incredible to think about stuff like that.
Yeah, my favorite part about it, like, I went in that event it was an event after Brazil, and I had just locked up my my Australia stipend, and you did too, actually, right? And I was like, you know what? I don't care how I do in this quarter. I got my Australia stipend. I'm going to Australia. That's all I care about. So I was just like, I'm just gonna play Squids again. I have Thanksgiving and I think it was midterm week that week, so it was just a rough week. And then so I was just gonna play Squids. I threw in the one of Faba, one card change from the list I played in Brazil, and I remember I was sitting there. I was like, I'm just gonna play this Faba. That guy who I think Brian DeVry is his name, DeVeres. I don't know. He got second to Robin in LAIC. He was playing the Mewtwo deck with Weak Guard. I was like, I'm just gonna play this to get rid of the Weak Guard of the Hood. And that was the whole idea behind it. And then start doing bad. End up making my way back to day 2, and I ended up seeing. I saw you. I saw John Eng, Rahul Reddy, a bunch of our friends at the top, and I was just like, they were all like, where have you been all day? How are you doing? I was like, I just won my last round. I'm in day 2. And I was like, they were like, we haven't seen you all day. And I was like, yeah, I don't really know how to explain it. I just kind of wasn't here today. I started at the bottom tables, was at the bottom tables all day, made my way back up. Every round I'd go outside between the rounds because the convention center was hot or something. I was uncomfortable. And then just kind of grinded my way through the event, made it back, and it was super relaxed. I just wasn't seeing anyone the whole day except for Joe. And it was just a weird thing where everyone was like, you made day 2, and I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a super fun event where I just kind of came out of nowhere and got the placement, and I was like, that's pretty sick.
I think I was in the same boat as some of those people. I think I was playing my final round at the time you're talking about, but yeah, just I remember seeing you lose round 1, and I was just like, oh, you made day 2? Oh, that's cool. And then we hit in the final round, and I'm like, oh, so I'm gonna get you into cut? Oh, this was interesting. How did we go from you losing round 1 to now you're in cut? That was such a funny event. And for anyone that doesn't know in chat, Catron and I actually attend the same community college. So when he was talking about midterms, it was the same thing. And funny story, we actually had a psychology class that he had asked me before or after we got home from Daytona, and he was like, "Yo, do we have a test this week in psychology?" I'm like, "No, I looked at the syllabus. We don't have a test." And sure enough, the first class,
We had a test.
psychology comes around. We sit down, and the professor's like, "All right, everyone, put away your phones, get ready for the test." And he just starts handing out booklets. And I'm like, there's no way this guy gives us the test. We just got back from Australia, hadn't attended class yet. We went to Daytona. Like, I was like, this guy, we talked to this professor in advance. We were like, there's no way we're getting this test. And sure enough, he walks up to us, and he's like, how was Australia? Double test. And I was just like, oh my God. I could have swore the syllabus said we didn't have a test. And sure enough, we both failed it. And yeah, that was definitely one of the most fun sets of weeks that I had ever had, and definitely an interesting turn of events.
Bro, that guy. Oh my god, I hate that guy. Oh my god, Shell, bro. Oh my god.
But chat, I'm gonna wrap up this episode of PTCG Hotline. We're ending it a little bit shorter because we don't have Henry here with us today, so definitely stay tuned for next week. We got an awesome guest. Catron, thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me. Feel free to plug any of your social medias, your articles, anything like that. Floor is yours.
I write articles for Pokey Beach. I got another one coming out soon. I don't know when, probably next couple weeks, week or two. You can follow my Twitter at busted_Catron. I know some of you were talking about the tattoo. It's on my thing. I can't show it right now because it's all bandaged up so that I can heal. But it's on my Twitter if you want to see that. But yeah, other than that, I don't have really anything. Sometimes I stream. I have a stream. You can follow that, busted_Catron as well. Sometimes I stream. It's not good quality. I don't really care what you say in chat, and if you're wrong, I'm gonna tell you you're wrong. But it's usually just me vibing and playing some pokes when I want to play some pokes.
Not to mention your face cam, as many streamers would have, is literally a minion gif clicking a little mouse.
Yeah, that's gas.
But yeah, that's gonna do it for us. I think, although there were a few jokes in this episode, and obviously I'm laughing now, a lot of in-depth conversation coming out of the heavy call here. But that's gonna wrap it up for us, guys. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate all the follows and subscriptions that happened. Shout out to Ozzy for that one. This VOD will be up hopefully tomorrow. Or I know it will be up tomorrow, don't know when. Stay tuned on the Twitter. Thank you guys so much for watching. That's going to wrap it up for us. Next week we'll have another amazing guest. We got some good guests lined up in the coming weeks, so definitely stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll have Henry here back next week, and hopefully my shift is better next week so that we don't have to delay this again. But thank you guys so much for watching, everyone in chat, all the callers. We appreciate you, and we'll see you all in the next episode of the PTCG Hotline. See you guys.